Hey everybody, Who's Your Jedi here with another review for you. This time I'm talking about episode 6 of season 1 of Supergirl called Red Faced. And this episode I thought was alright. Um, in short, the Lucy, Jimmy stuff does continue to kind of bore me, but here it actually did perk my interest up at moments. And I definitely did like that they took the time to kind of give Lucy Lane a little bit of her own character arc with standing up to her dad, and that was cool. But still, this particular thing, it's not really grabbing me that well. So let's just kind of get right into some things. First of all, one of the big things, of course, is we have Sam Lane introduced in this episode, and he's very much to form. He's just played as military guy who really doesn't like aliens and is exceptionally distrustful of Superman, which is, of course, very ironic given who his oldest daughter is sleeping with. Now they do sort of raise the point, at least Hank Henshaw does, that people are a lot of people out there who don't like Superman aren't really afraid of him because they think, well, it's basically like, well, what happens if Superman ever loses his temper? And that is kind of an understandable fear to some degree. I mean, let's face it. If Superman was Superman was pissed off at you, what are you going to do against a guy like that? All right. But the problem with this is that at the end of the day, Superman is like everybody else. I mean, any person is capable of losing their temper and, of losing their temper. And we all do it from time to time. But most people who lose their temper never really resort to anything involving violence. I mean, if I lose my temper, I usually just sort of yell a little bit, and that's about it. So again, it's just sort of like, how much do you want just flat out paranoia to rule you? Are you going to obsess over what a person might do, even though they've given you no evidence that they might? Now, sure, it always pays to think of contingencies and stuff like that, but still, it's like Lane just out of his distrust of aliens just assumes that Superman is this time bomb waiting to go off, and thus by extension that Supergirl is exactly the same thing. And in fact, in her case, it might even be worse simply because she has very little track record of being somebody that people have seen out there doing good stuff. That's still pretty new for her. Superman's been doing this for more than a decade, as I understand it, like 12 years or something. So, I mean, Kara's like I said, Kara's even under more suspicion in his eyes. Now this whole military thing versus the DEO. I don't know. This sort of just feels very played out. Government agencies butting heads with each other and all of this. It's just. But it was sort of nice to see Hank Henshaw, sort of sticking up for Kara, even just a little bit. So yeah. But at the end of the day, Sam Lane, not that huge a deal. He's a big jerk who's never going to trust Kara no matter what, even after she saves his life. Now, the real cool stuff that we have here is that we're introduced to Red Tornado. And man, just the idea that we're living in a world where they did live action Red Tornado, and it wasn't so bad that you wanted to smack my head. That I wanted to smack my head against a wall, utterly amazes me. Now, in the comics, Red Tornado is basically kind of an android who achieved sentience, has wind powers, became a good guy, member of the Justice League. There was some weird stuff with like an air elemental in there that I never really understood very well. It's kind of a mentor at one point to the Young Justice team in the comics. I do remember that. But again, not a character I know super well. Now here, he never even gets a line. He never even gets to speak. And the whole time, the brief time in which he has achieved sentience is not under the control of the scientist, Dr. Morrow, who we'll talk about in a minute. All he does is attack Kara. And again, in the comics, Red Tornado is a good guy. But this kind of gives this character somewhere to go. Here he's if they ever bring him back. He starts off as just sort of this mindless machine. He achieves sentience, and the first thing he does is attack Kara. But if he were to sort of become back later and he's maybe evolved a little bit, has a personality and idea of his own, well, that puts Kara in a pretty unique position. She and her cousin are basically the last two Kryptonians in the universe. Well, okay, not exactly the last two Kryptonians in the universe. I suppose that's not exactly accurate. Okay, but basically a handful of Kryptonians in the universe. And here's Red Tornado, a singularly unique life form. There's only one of him in the entire universe. So that isolation is something that I think Kara could actually relate to if she stopped and thought about it for a bit. So let's see. What else do we have to say about the other characters? All right. Well, Maxwell Lord continues to be, Lex Luthor light. Let's put it like that. Nothing really particularly huge to say about Alex. Just to sort of her doing some more sparring with Maxwell Lord, and it's nice to see that Kara was straight with her, and Alex is taking what she said with her seriously. So I'm kind of glad it's not going to turn into a thing with it looks like Alex might actually side with Lord against Kara. That would be a little too much. So the scientist that created Red Tornado, before I forget him, well, they refer to him as Dr. Morrow. Now, in the comics, he's called T.O. Morrow. Tomorrow. He's created back in a simpler time. What can we say? Yeah. And he often hangs out with Professor Ivo, the live action version of whom was a big deal over on, I guess it was season 2 of Arrow. So that's kind of cool. I don't think we're going to get to see Ivo on Supergirl. The CW probably has his rights tied up for quite some time. But even though it looked like he died this episode, it really wouldn't surprise me if they found a way to bring him back, especially given what happened with the headset and projecting his mind and all of that. So, I mean, if they can do Red Tornado, you have to wonder if they might not do something like Tomorrow Woman or Amazo. Although Amazo was kind of a little bit referenced over on Arrow. Yeah. But I would totally be down for them doing Tomorrow Woman. She's a character that was used just a little bit in the comics, but I quite liked her. And if you want to pull stuff from the comics, then the Grant Morrison, Howard Porter run on JLA is a darn good place to go. That was some fantastic comics. Some basically like my favorite Justice League run ever. I loved those comics. They were great stuff. Anywho, just kind of jump back. But the main thing here, though, with Kara this episode is kind of controlling her anger and dealing with that. And yeah, if you're going to have powers like that, then yeah, of course it's very important that you're able to control your anger. And I kind of like that she sort of gets this interesting advice and opinions from Cat Grant and Jimmy Olsen. Jimmy points out like, hey, I'm a black dude. Look at the way people think if I start getting angry in public. And then Cat Grant tells her that story like, women in the workplace aren't allowed to really get angry, and we certainly can't resort to violence or anything like that. And Cat makes a really fair point. A lot of stuff that involving anger that men can get away with in the workplace, women really can't. Now, I do take issue with her story about Perry White throwing a chair out the window at the Daily Planet, mostly because the Daily Planet has usually been portrayed as being in a skyscraper, and if you throw a chair out of a window at a skyscraper, there's a really good chance you might kill somebody on the ground. And, well, even if it was on the ground floor, somebody throwing a chair through a window, yeah, that gets you called a crazy person by everybody around you. Okay? That just does not fly, man or woman. That's going to be called, somebody's going to be calling the higher ups, whoever is the publisher of the Daily Planet or whatever. And it's like, yeah, Perry White's gone insane. I mean, seriously. Imagine somebody throwing a chair through a window at your job, even if it's the boss. That ain't going to fly. It's just not. I mean, that's BS, and I'm just going to leave it at that. That said, though, it was pretty fun to watch Kara lose her temper and yell at Cat Grant, which is quite overdue. Again, I have said repeatedly, why does anybody want to work for Cat Grant? And Cat Grant quite cheerfully points out this episode she doesn't pay Kara very much. Kara, darn it. But again, we kind of see Kara kind of being mentored by Cat a little bit, and I think I think even Kat's maybe started to realize a little bit what she's doing. She just doesn't want to admit to herself that she likes Kara and is doing this because she wants to help her. She sort of told herself this story about who she is, that she's this very self-involved person, that apart from her son, she doesn't really care about much of anyone. But we do see these hints that, there's more to her than that. And it's especially easy to see that in contrast against her mother, who is, wow, really, really horrible. I mean, she's all of Cat Grant's worst qualities, but none of her redeeming features. And you could even imagine that a desire to not be like her mother might really be one of the big driving forces causing Cat to, reach out and show a little compassion towards Kara. Damn it. I keep wanting to call her Kara. I don't know why. Now, that's maybe doing the right thing for the wrong reason. I tend to think that Cat Grant has sort of realized that her mom is a really terrible example and maybe tries to shy away from that a little bit, but it's one of those things, like it or not, a lot of our parents does very often rub off on us. I know growing up, when I was in my early 20s, there were moments when I caught myself doing things that my father and my grandfather did that I always was annoyed by, and I'm like, oh my god, I just did that exact same thing. Oh god. I think that's kind of a feeling we all have growing up. But there's not necessarily anything wrong with that. It's just a part of life, and we're under no obligation to become anything like our parents. And in some cases, that's definitely a good thing. There are more than a few really, really awful parents out there, as anyone who's ever worked in education can tell you. Now, this whole episode ends with Red Tornado apparently heading for the scrap heap, and Kara powerless. Now, it's pretty clear she probably just expended too much energy, and it's going to take a little while for her Kryptonian batteries to recharge. Now, in the comics, Superman, if he does this is true. He can't expend too much energy, or if he's away from the sun or solar energy or whatever for too long, his power level will tend to go down. But recharging is basically like, boom, like that. At least that's how I remember having seen it before. He only needs just a second or two to get back enough to handle most anything. Now here it looks like the show is going to take some liberties with that. That's okay. It's dramatic. And yeah, I think that kind of covers everything that I had to say about this episode. So guys, until next time, please comment, rate, and subscribe, and of course you can follow me on Twitter at Hoosier Jedi. Until next time, take care and have a good one.